So in this session, we examined some of the variety of risk of bias tools. We had a closer look at them and we actually put some of them into practice. So remember to relax and enjoy the show. Let's go.
We're going to have a look and a very juicy discussion on the various tools specifically for performing the systematic reviews. If you're going to recall, in our last session, we did discuss what risk of bias entails in systematic review. But in this particular session, we are going to be looking at the various tools that you can use in performing systematic review. We're going to have a look at the nature of the domain. We're going to also look at some of other properties that are contained in the tool, and we're just going to do those, make a very good explanation of what it is, so that even if you're anywhere and you're listening, you have a very proper understanding of the various risk of bias tools that we can use in performing a systematic review. So our outline for today is one that is going to be very, very magnificent. We're going to be looking at the risk of bias mind map. Then we'll have a look at some of these key quality assessments or risk of bias tools, such as critical appraisal skill program from, look at the Cochrane risk of bias tool, look at the Joanna Breeze Institute critical appraisal tools, and the Newcastle Tower scale wouldn't be left out. The Amstar checklist also is going to be examined, and the Gerard checklist. Then we also have a summary of the tools and when to use it. So we technically need to understand when can we be able to use some of these tools in performing our risk of bias. So all these are the things we're going to be looking at for them. We'll have our practical exercises. Now, it's very important for us to understand that in our risk of bias mind map, the first thing we need to understand is that in terms of the risk of bias, the purpose is for you to evaluate the quality and rigor of studies included in systematic reviews. And the importance is to ensure that findings are reliable and reduce the risk of bias in the results. Now, how about for the outcomes? What it means is that we want to provide an outcome or a systematic review that has very high quality. And, when you say something has high quality, it has that integrity that you are longing for. So now, we already understand what risk of bias means, knowing that it is those tools that we use in assessing the integrity of our included studies. We want to know if our included studies contains the appropriate checklist, or our included studies contains the appropriate information that is required for it to be deemed fit to be included. And that is where we will now come to take a look at each of these tools. First of all, we'll look at the critical appraisal skill program checklist. We'll look at the Cochrane bias, Joanna Breeze Institute, Newcastle Tower scale, the Amstar checklist, and the grade, which is grading, recommendations, assessment, development, and evaluation. So all these are technically what we are going to be putting into consideration in our conversation today. So the critical appraisal skill program form is a very, very good risk of bias tool that is being used. And we can use it for any type of study. We can use the critical appraisal skill program form for both qualitative and quantitative studies. In short, it's a widely used checklist in research. Most of the research that we perform, 99% of the time, or at least for a very reasonable amount of time, we use the CAPS checklist. It's a type of checklist or risk of bias tool that it contains various sub-tools. We have the CASP for randomized, we have the CASP for non-randomized, like observational studies, cohort studies, systematic reviews, economic evaluation checklist, etc. So there are so many of them, and there are always 3 key domains, major domains, in any of these critical appraisal skill program checklists. One of those domains is the validity. So it contains key questions that tries to ascertain the validity of the study. And the second one is the results. It contains the domains of questions that tries to look at the domain. We're going to also have a look on this. And then the relevance, which is very pivotal, knowing if the result can be applied in real world setting. So an example there is that for a study of mental health interventions, so we use the CASP to know if the study used reliable measures and provided clear results. So there's also a detailed approach to understanding how we can use the CASP checklist in performing our risk of bias. We're going to have a detailed look at that in this our session. Then the next is what we address to be the Cochrane risk of bias tool. So the Cochrane risk of bias tool, like we explained in our previous session, is widely used for interventional studies, experimental studies, sort of RCTs and all that. So the purpose of the Cochrane risk of bias tool is to evaluate the bias in randomized control trials. And it contains domains such as the selection bias, which we explained in our previous session, where in selection bias, we're trying to know if the groups are comparable to at the start. And then for the performance bias is where the participants, whether if the participants were blinded to the intervention. Now we look at the detection, where we try to look at if the outcomes were unbiased. And in terms of attribution, try to know if all the outcomes were reported. And that was reporting if there was selective reporting. So these are some of the things we need to look at, because when we're looking at the Cochrane risk of bias to assessing any study, an example is just like trying to compare two drugs. So there are definitely a lot of things that are going to be put into consideration for the two groups of participants that are going to be offered or that are going to be administered that drug, that new drug, or an existing drug that we're trying to initiate a comparison so that we can know if we can actually notice any change, which is what an experiment is all about. So when it tries to look at if there's any change or improvement or whatever. So that is for the Cochrane risk of bias too. Now for the Joanna Briggs Institute, personally, many a times when I'm performing my systematic review, I usually use the Joanna Briggs Institute. Whether I'm doing a systematic review of myself or for a client, I use the Joanna Briggs Institute, particularly when it's because of the domains and the nature of these two. And is it for mostly for cross-sectional cohort and case control. Those domains are participant selection, data collection, outcomes, confounding factors. So there could other be some sub-questions that makes up each of these domains that still expands the appraisal too. Yeah, so don't get your eyes stressed here. For the Newcastle Tower scale, very fantastic risk of bias too, where we perform quality assessment of non-randomized trials like cohort and case control. So some of the domains it contains three major domains. Of each of them contains their sub-questions: selection, comparability, and outcome. So in terms of the selection of the Newcastle Tower scale, we're interested to know how representative is the sample from those included studies in the participating risk of bias session. And again, for the comparability, we're trying to know if the groups are actually similar in terms of several maybe key factors or other potential variables that are being put into consideration. So knowing if these groups are similar is what we examine in the word comparability. Because remember that the Newcastle Tower scale, it has to be a before to after study, sort of. It won't be an experiment, but a before to after study, meaning that it can have a control and a case group, or it can have a before of cohort and after of the same cohort. So these are the things that are very important to note. So it's just like studying if smoking causes lung cancer, which is a very wide example. So the NOS checklist, which we call the Newcastle Tower scale, is going to check if the cases and controls are comparable in each, and also, as well as other things that are contained in the domain. So it doesn't end there, because for a systematic review itself, how do we measure the quality assessment of a systematic review? We have two key tools that we use. We can use the Prisma flow diagram, or we use the Amstar checklist. So we can try to do an umbrella review, which is a systematic review of systematic reviews. How are we now going to be able to perform the risk of bias of the included studies, which are systematic reviews? And that is where the Amstar checklist comes in, because the purpose is that it tries to evaluate quality of the systematic review and their methodology. So some of the domains are still what we already know about the systematic review: study selection, extraction, bias, funding, and conflict. So these questions are to be rigorously addressed before we can include the systematic review in the umbrella review. So the gap assessment is another similar one that is being performed here, where we try to assess the quality of the overall evidence of the review. We look at some of the domains like the risk of bias, inconsistencies, indirectness, imprecision, and publication bias. So these are lots of things we usually do, and it's used in assessing the overall quality of the review, like that of the system. So the question is, when do we need to use these tools? Already, when each time we explain these tools, we do maintain some of the positions that the studies might have in terms of design before it can be potentially considered for inclusion. And that means for the CAPS checklist is that in general, we can use the CAPS checklist for a lot of studies, and we're going to be having a look on that. We're going to be having a look on that for the CAPS checklist. And for the risk of bias by Cochrane is specifically for randomized control trial. Then for the JPI checklist, it's for maybe observational studies and others. NORS is mainly for cohort and case control, while the AMSTAR is for systematic reviews and the grade is for systematic review evidence too. So we're going to have the hands-on on practicals. So what am I going to do? I'm going to hover in here. I'm going to create my worksheet. Now, remember that we already have an existing title that we are attacking. So what we are going to do is we are going to get out some of those articles that we used in our what? Data extraction. So now what we're going to do, we're not going to use these articles to perform our risk of that. Remember that our question of interest is still on determinants of teenage pregnancy in sub-Saharan Africa. So I'm just going to quickly click that, paste it here, open my worksheet. So I'm going to type to that. So this is the topic we're looking at. Remember in our last session, we already addressed and showed us how we can be able to locate some of those checklists. So now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to do a quick one. I'm going to open up those articles. So I'm going to click here. I'm going to open the third one. Now, for the sake of this lecture, I'm just going to use OpenAI to write how our quality assessment section is going to look like. If I put it on manuscript, so the first thing you want to do is you want to explain. Now here, we're going to perform our quality assessment here using because they are cross-sectional studies, we're going to use the axis checklist. So I'm going to add for Jordan Briggs Institute. So we're going to check out that. So let's see if we can use the Joanna Briggs Institute to rate the four studies. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to have a look at the checklist, at the GBI checklist. This is for systematic reviews. So look at the GBI checklist for observational studies. So we just got that, the checklist, critical appraisal tool for. So the next thing we're going to do is we have to check out the table of yes, we have no, we have unclear. So we have to check it out, and that's 8 domains. So what are we going? What am I going to do? So I'm just going to create a table for this. So what I'm doing is I'll come to my. So I'm going to ask my question by this side, then my study author is going to be down. Study author. So the first question from the checklist is, where the inclusion in the sample clearly defined. So we go back here. So I'm just checking it out. Was that something? I'm just going to place the words here so it doesn't scatter the table. Then I'm going to hover down. So I'm going to copy that quickly. So the subject. So I'm going to check that as well. Study subject and setting described in detail. So I'm going to just show the study setting. So if it wasn't discussed in detail, then I'll have to expunge. Then I'm going to check the next one. Exposure measured in a reliable and in a valid and reliable way. So we're going to just call this exposure measurement. So I'll check out the next one. After exposure measurement, so objective and standard criteria used for measurement in the condition. So all these are just the domains that I'm actually after because the three studies are, two of the studies are cross-sectional. So So confounding factors. Then also strategies to deal with confounding factors. So the outcome measurement in a valid and reliable way. So we're looking at the outcome measurement. Then also we'll look at the last one, which is going to be statistical. Now, this is where it gets interesting. So, for us to perform our quality assessment, the only thing we need to do is just to open that article. So, we can put this as Ajayi et al. And Fem Volade et al. So, we'll quickly put that Ajayi et al. Whatever in 2020 or whatever. Fenzu et al. Whatever. So let's check. Let me confirm that. 2020. Cool. So now let's assume now to start our quality assessment, we need to declare our rating, right? So here now is going to be our what? Our rating. Here now will be our overall. Okay, maybe whatever thing we might call it, overall quality comment. But the major thing we need is our rating. We really need to take our time and get this what done. So for this first study on Ajayi et al. 222, what we're going to do is just very simple. You click on this, inclusion of sample size clearly defined. So for Ajayi study, I'm going to go down. Yes, it did. It did. So what I'm going to match is, yeah, so for this friend zone, now we might not have found it in the results. Okay, yeah, we did. You see, sample size was this. So this is what we have to be doing. Study setting and objective, were they clear? Yes, we did see that. Now, so we might decide to numerically assign numbers to each particular domain that is fulfilled. Remember, it doesn't always apply to randomized trials because there's some certain areas in randomized trial that is going to be no. It becomes a problem. So at the end, we have over 8. So we can have 7 over 8. Maybe yes is yes. Okay, cool. So now what it means is that at the end now, we have to create a cutoff point, right? Remember that we did say high quality when we look at the mind map. High quality, medium, and low quality. So what we will now see in a jiffy is just that. So let's assume that this was score yes, and there was a no, and here it's yes. So at the end of it now, let's say we've got to rate these studies, and this is maybe yes, yes, this no, this yes. Okay, cool. Now, this is how I'm going to explain the rating. For high quality, it's a subjective judgment. So it's more like, no, we'll say equal to 5/8 to 8/8. Whereas medium could be medium, medium is going to be equal to 4/10. So 6. Whereas look what it is going to be equals to now for the low quality, it's going to be less than 4/10. So anything less than 4/10 is classified as low quality. So at the end of the day, we will now have that for every years is denoted as 1, no is equals to 0, maybe is equals to half, for example. So at the point, we got towards here. So it's just technically the quality. We look out for all these domains. And we go say, for example, my name is Innocent. Innocent, I got lots of. So that is what we try to see when we are addressing quality. So we numerically rate them. So this also applies to other checklists depending on their domains. So in line with the workflow, so we need to understand the study design, select the approach, know the appropriate tool, apply some of these domains in our domain, record the results, and interpret findings. So I've left out some exercises for us there. And before we move to the next stage of synthesis, just have to have a short summary of the game where I did mention about risk of bias map, because it's very important for you to evaluate any systematic review. Then we've got critical appraisal skill from program form and others. So that is just basically it for our systematic review. So thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to have you on this session.